Get in today at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. The judges are going to decide en banc, okay, so that is a sign of the seriousness here. En banc is just French, it means in bench. They're all three of them are going to hear this. They're going to decide whether they're ready to rule, they need a hearing, or it's going to go away. So that'll be the big moment to see what they do. If there's a hearing, that's going to be very impressive. David Gregory, what's at stake?
Well, the order itself is at stake. The very question of how much authority the president has vested in him through the Constitution to determine who comes in and out of the country, who can make immigration laws, and determine a national security threat. And that's why this could, of course, be ultimately decided by the Supreme Court. That could take as long as months if they get involved, and the fate of the order in the interim is the real question, since this was never really fully organized upon implementation. But that's a very serious legal question. The president knew, the White House knew, presumably, that they were testing the bounds of that presidential authority. Most times the courts are deferential to that authority about national security. Here it's being tested.
David Drucker, do you get the sense that it's been a bit of a rude awakening for President Trump, who, after all, has been the king of the Trump organization for decades? He says jump, everybody jumps, and now he's confronting the checks and balances of the American democracy, and he says jump, and a federal judge says no.
I think that's true, and I think that's what we've learned over the past couple of weeks, is to watch them try and rush things through to make good on his campaign promises, and to realize that not only do you have checks and balances between the judicial branch and the congressional branch, but you've got a sprawling executive branch bureaucracy, and you've got to make sure that all of your ducks in a row. I mean, one of the reasons why this order didn't quite work, I mean, there are legal ramifications, but as we now know, the White House didn't fully communicate with the executive agencies that are charged with carrying this out. That led to indecision and some bit of chaos as to how it was supposed to work. You saw them pulling things back on the fly. And even though those sorts of things are not supposed to matter when it comes to jurisprudence, go before the courts when there's an argument and they can see that the executive branch doesn't necessarily know exactly what it's doing. Judges are human, and it's one of the reasons I think that this executive order ran into trouble.
The justiciability of this case, whether there's standing, whether the court will check all the boxes it needs to review the case, is up in the air. It's not an easy call, David Chalian, but politically, how did it play for the president so far, especially with his comments? Is it written off the way the vice president wants it to be, that, hey, he's allowed to criticize other branches of government, that's all it is?
Right. Mike Pence was sort of playing the role again of what President Trump meant to say was, because he wasn't just criticizing the ruling, he was calling this judge a so-called judge. So clearly he was trying to attack the judge personally as well. We've seen this before in Donald Trump's track record. Again, to Allison's point, as a way that we saw him operate in his business, which is press every advantage possible. One advantage he has now is sort of marshaling his army of supporters to see his way of thinking of this, even if it is not within sort of the bounds of tradition of what we normally see about how an executive deals with the judicial branch. I think Donald Trump's potential problem here is that it's one thing to have his army of supporters, but when he starts crossing those lines where his own party in Washington, congressional officials on the Republican side, start questioning whether or not he's stepping out of bounds, whereas Vice President has to go out and say he's just questioning the ruling, I think it shows that Donald Trump is not fully comfortable yet in how he interacts with the other branches.
And David Gregory, as I understand it, now, because it is going through the court system and may go as high as the Supreme Court, all of Mr. Trump's tweets become part of the record, and they could end up hurting him. Here's one tweet that is significant, sent out yesterday. Just cannot believe a judge would put our country in such peril. If something bad happens, blame him. And the court system, people pouring in bad. Well, first, people are not pouring in unchecked. That's not our system. But what do his tweets now mean now that this is in a different arena?
I mean, honestly, he sounds like an old man sitting on his porch yelling at somebody to get off his lawn. I mean, that's just the reality. I think we'll do well to start separating his rants as president of the United States from the actions that the administration is taking. They are appealing. They are following the procedures they want to. But now you've had in the first 18 days successive weekends where he has completely derailed what his administration is trying to do with a kind of personal indulgence by attacking people personally, launching an attack on the separation of powers. But what it really comes down to is this obsession with himself. And I think that's going to start to wear thin.